Well, I can only say after that there was a truly brave testimony, and thank you, Moazzam, for speaking in such vivid terms on something which happened to you. As many of us are Amnesty members and supporters here, it's always difficult to sort of gauge the feeling of people in these sort of circumstances, and you truly indicated that this evening. I'm sure there are lots of questions, so would somebody like to start with a question or an observation? Yes, Jim.
Could you tell us a bit more about when you did get to hear about your family, because you left them in a pretty perilous state, and in my mind they're still there. Can you reassure me?
No, thankfully they're not. They're in Birmingham. Which is a bit different. My wife was clearly in a terrible state, and of course they are the unsung heroes often in the cases of anybody whose cases come to light. You don't hear about their family members, but she was much braver than I was. And what she did, even as a foreigner in Pakistan, was to have the good sense to go to a lawyer. The Pakistani government denied that I even existed, that I was even in custody. So she produced the leasehold documents of the house to show that, oh, well, this person is here, and she produced my passport. And then the court had issued a habeas corpus writ for me to be produced to the court. That's interesting, because habeas corpus came from Britain, right? And it's there in Pakistan, it's also in Kenya, it's in New Zealand, it's everywhere where Britain has been. This great civilizing factor that today has been suspended, or simply doesn't apply. So after that, after the government denied all knowledge, and they said, well, sorry, he's now no longer in our custody, which was true, they sold me over to the Americans, she and the children went back to the UK. And I've been present for the birth of all my children, except for the last one. And he is somebody that I only saw after I was released in 2005. And when I came back home, after the release, I saw all my children. My eldest daughter, who was 6 at the time, was now 10. And she was the closest to me. So when I used to see her last, when I saw her last, the image in my mind was still that young child. And now she was not. I couldn't pick her up anymore. I couldn't throw her in the air, and she felt that. And the one I could pick up and throw in the air didn't have anything to do with me, because didn't know who I was, and that was my youngest son. And to add insult to injury, when I came back home, he had taken up my position in the bed. I kicked him out.
Another question or comment?
2,976. You didn't give us a second part.
Sorry, yes, good point. The reason why I say this number, the reason why I think it's important to know a number, a distinct number, is because in contrast, and I think this is where it's so important, we look here, particularly in the Western world, somehow that our casualties count more than anybody else's. That we are more equal than others. That in the name of 2,976 people, we have killed, we don't know how many people we've killed. Nobody. I challenge anybody at all, statisticians, politicians, journalists, anyone, to tell me exactly, to the single digit, how many people died just in the first week of Operation Blue Freedom. Not how many people have died thus far. And if you add to that, remember I said the link from Afghanistan, Ibn al-Sheikh and Libya, was a direct link made, Al-Qaeda and weapons mass destruction to Iraq. If you add together that, if you add together what's happening in Pakistan as a result of all of this, clearly, everyone's equal. Some people are more equal than others. So my point about this is that when it comes to numbers, and there's a pun here, people don't count.
Mary.
You seem remarkably sane, and I just wonder how you maintained that sanity during that dreadful time that you were in prison.
That was going to be my question.
Well, I should have had my wife and kids here to answer that. I was saying to a gentleman earlier on that I have a philosophical way of looking at things. Part of that is to do with my own faith. Part of it has to do with an acceptance of what I believe is my fate, and that's what came about in Guantanamo. It's really interesting. I've got to tell you this. I know it's a bit of a sidetrack, but there's this film that I've seen. It's called Enter the Dragon. It's Bruce Lee, and he's in this part where he's fighting everybody and beating them all up, and then all of a sudden these doors, they just slam all around him, and he's in this enclosed area, and he just walks up to the door, touches the door, realizes he's not getting out. He sits down, gets his weapon, puts it around his neck, and just sits down into the lotus position and just waits. Now, I didn't do that. I wasn't fighting anybody, but the point of this was that there has to be a time, or for me there was a time when I said, I resign myself to my fate. I can't do anything to change this. I can't fight an entire empire by myself, especially not from solitary confinement in a tiny little cell. So let me do what I think is the only thing I can do. Not to lose my dignity, not to lose my self-respect. They're not going to take that away, even if they take all my clothes away. They're not going to take it away. And for the most part, I try to keep it. And I will also say that I am not unique in that. If you look at the majority of the prisoners, I have to say some of them, like Binyat and others, who have gone through things I can't even imagine, have also kept their dignity and their sense of mind and their self-composure.
Yes, we've been seeing in the last week and obviously earlier on the fact that the British government seems to be getting into increasing difficulty in the courts. When we write as members of Amnesty to the Foreign Office, we usually get a standard letter coming back saying we, the British government, are doing everything possible in relation to the United States. So I've got two sort of linked questions. One is, how do you see the situation with the British government at the moment? Do you think that their position is gradually unravelling? And secondly, in terms of campaigning groups like Caged Prisoner or our own group, in terms of the actions that we can take, do you have any views about how we can optimise our effort? What kinds of things where the government may be more susceptible to
Well, let me answer the last part first. And Amnesty International is one of these organisations that right from the get-go, right from the beginning, was campaigning for people that have been held extrajudicially by the Americans. And it's an organisation that I know had helped my own father campaigning in a great deal. And just the sorts of things that Amnesty, I was just telling my friend outside, I said, one thing that I really respect about Amnesty is that they know how to hold people to account, is to tell them, this is what you're doing wrong, we're watching you. That's a really important thing to do, particularly at a time when people think that they have executive and presidential powers. And especially, if you look at the case, for example, let's look at the case of Shaka Ahmed, who is, again, there are leaflets outside for this man. Amnesty has campaigned for him. I campaigned for him as an individual as well as somebody from my own organisation. And that is because he's somebody that I know personally. His children are all in London, and he's never seen his youngest child. Remember I said I only saw my youngest child at the age of 3. Shaka's youngest son, Faris, is 8 years old. He has never seen his father. And the other children are so young that they can barely remember him. Shaka has never been charged with a crime. They don't even intend to charge him with a crime. Yet he's still in Guantanamo Bay. And he's a British resident, and his wife and children are all British citizens. The government, under David Miliband's statement, have said, like you just mentioned, that they are doing everything that they can to get him back. But that's not enough, because he's still there. And that is the point. The nature of how terribly unjust this is, I know that we would never, ever tolerate this for ourselves. We would never stand for it. And so an organisation like Amnesty International must, I think keeping up the pressure when the government says we are doing enough, the answer is that, well, you're not doing enough because he's still there. And the place is, by all international views, an illegal place. It is supposed to be closed down, so what is the point of keeping him there? And I think that had it not been for campaigns of the individuals, and I really hate this type of notion when people say, let's humanize the person. He's already human. Why do you want to humanize a human? But sadly, that's what you have to do. Amnesty does that too, and I think that keeping that pressure up, writing and continuing writing to the people in the Foreign Office is extremely important.
Since your return to this country, have you been harassed at all by the security services, or how are you treated by the authorities?
I've been harassed by audiences. The security service
No, this is Norwich, you don't.
yeah, clearly. The security services never hassle me, other than, I think, just a couple of weeks ago when I came back from Sweden. And this was the first time that I was ever stopped or questioned or anything like that. And the reason why they said they'd stopped me is because of who I was. They said, I said, why are you stopping me? And they said, because you're Moazzam Begg. I thought you'd know that. I said, I'm sorry, my friend, that's just not good enough. That is not a reason to stop anybody. And I'll tell you what the reason why they don't stop me is because I have a case against the intelligence services. And according to, I think, whichever section it is, that at the ports of entry and exit to the country, you are required, you must answer questions about the reason of your travel. But I said, I won't answer anything. And I know that you can arrest me, and I know you can take me to prison for it. So in the words of President Bush, bring it on. Because I know that the next step for me will be that this stoppage will be added to my case against intelligence services to show that this has not ended. It's not finished. So they went back and made phone calls to people and said, sorry, Mr. Begg, you're free to go. And as far as I'm concerned, that, again, this is a new law. It's a relatively new law in the United Kingdom that's come about after the war on terror and so forth. Other than that, there is nothing. And if they're watching me, hi.
Question at the back, and then, yes.
Could you tell us a little more about your release, what you were told and how long it took when you were told something to actually be released, and just the process of getting you home?
Yeah. I was eventually, as I said, I was in solitary confinement for about 2 years. Near the last part of my time there, I was put into what's known as the blocks, and I was held with other prisoners. I remained there for about 2 to 3 months, and then one day they came along, the soldiers came along and said, get your stuff together, you're going somewhere. So I thought that at this point that they were going to move me to a different part of the prison camp, because they moved people around a lot. But they took me back to Camp Echo, which was solitary confinement, so I felt really dejected. Within a couple of days, somebody turned up, and he said, Mr. Begg, he said 558, my number, they didn't give names, you would know this. We have decided to release you to the authorities of the British government, and we have no charges against you. Not the charges have been dropped, there are no charges to begin with. And that was it. I didn't believe him, but there were some, as I said, decent soldiers there, and some of those decent soldiers confirmed to me what I hoped was true, and they said they were really happy for me. And then I was put onto a coach with 3 other British prisoners, and we were accompanied by 40 guards. We were shackled up completely, and I remember it's the first time I spoke to these other guys, and I said to them, look at these guys, they think we're going to escape on our way to freedom. And we were put onto this British military transport plane. But of course, there were no longer any shackles. When I was handed over to British customs, oh sorry, before this happened, this is the most important part, is that being all completely shackled, it took an hour for us to get from one side of the island to the other where the airport was. By the time we got there, the British were waiting, but the Americans in their great speed to get us over there. I'd forgotten the keys for the padlocks and the and handcuffs. So they had to snap off our shackles with massive wire cutters, which I thought was so symbolic of breaking through the chains of slavery. And then we were flown over back to the United Kingdom. I was taken to a police station, Paddington Green Police Station. They asked me if I wanted to make a phone call, and I said, I can't believe you're asking me this question. I don't even remember the number of who to call. And I heard the sound of protesters outside. My father sent a message that he wants to see me. I said, I refuse to see anybody in a prison cell. I will only see my family as a free man. And I saw them as a free man in the home of my lawyer and great friend, Gareth Pearce. And there I met my family and became a free man in 2005.
I'm wondering if you're, there's a type of person as yourself. I wonder if you're typical of the sort of people that they take, that they, as you put it, kidnap, and if they've underestimated you, because in the level of education and how articulate you are, and how, the clarity that you have, and I'm wondering if they've made, so to speak, a serious mistake in taking you and then releasing you, in the sense that you are communicating so clearly and so movingly your experience, and in my view with such courage, and whether they've actually underestimated the consequences of their actions.
Well, that's what I was telling somebody earlier on. I said that, again, as part of you know, there are many downsides, of course, to being held without charge or trial, and you can't think of many positives. But to me, and you have to look at it in a positive way, how else could I have been able to say these things? And you know, there's a big audience here, but I'm used to speaking sometimes at audiences where there are hundreds of people. How else could somebody like me, a young Asian Muslim boy brought up in Birmingham, with just an ordinary person, how else could my voice have reached across to people? It couldn't. This had to happen. And I didn't want it to happen. I didn't do anything for it to happen. They made it happen. So in a sense, again, if they're here, I have to thank FBI, CIA, MI5. Cheers.
This is a highly selective audience, so that's it. Ben.
When you were detained, how much were you aware of what was being said in the world media, or were you sort of very much incommunicado?
I was incommunicado entirely. I don't like to say I all the time, because there were hundreds of us, and still are in some cases. We are not given access to any current affairs information. There are no newspapers, there are no TVs, there are no radios, there are no visits. You don't even know anything about your own case, let alone what's happening in the world. What information you do get, however, comes from some of the lawyers, but this was only after 2 years and 8 months when they were given access. And perhaps, although there aren't any new ones now, new prisoners who bring in new information. What they do bring you are copies of National Geographic from the 1960s and the 70s, so that you're really up to date. And they bring you lots of books, or not lots of books, but some books that were written in the 19th century. Classics, so that you can improve your English and speak to Americans in proper English.
The war on terror continues under the presidency of Barack Obama. When we had the invasion of South Waziristan, talked about increasing 2,000 more troops into Afghanistan. But because the numbers in Guantanamo are declining, is because that was such a prominent example. People had this sense that the question of rendition, etc., is a declining problem. In terms of numbers, do you get the sense that it's still increasing? The number of people held in secret and rendition, etc., is actually still increasing?
Well, what's really important here is people understand the language. It's so important. I can't stress upon it. I've given you a couple of examples of how language can be easily manipulated. When Obama said that he will close Guantanamo and he will close the secret prisons and he will stop torture, like I said, he didn't say anything about military detention sites. So that means Bagram. It means Abu Ghraib. It means anywhere else. It means that, and they are the majority. It also means, if you remember, He didn't say anything about extraordinary rendition. Rendition is the process of bringing somebody. It's the kidnap. Initially, it's the kidnap and the abduction. And they can render you. You can still be extraordinarily rendered, and people are rendered to third-party nations, where people are tortured and abused and so forth. But there's a plausible deniability where you can say, "No, I didn't do it. They're not in my custody. I didn't torture them." So that is happening. And as long as, of course, there is a war, there will always be this argument that this is the time of war. We have to do these sorts of things. These things happen. A few bad apples, and the same old arguments that you hear presented when atrocities have taken place. The reality is that nobody's applying the Geneva Conventions. It's as if they simply don't exist. And I'll tell you one more point. When we were first brought into Kandahar as prisoners, we were all given EPW cards. That means that there was an initial recognition that we will be treated as enemy prisoners of war. When they realized their mistake in terms of how they wanted to treat us, they removed these cards, and with it, any hope of us being treated as human beings.
As David said, we followed Binyam's case very, very closely as a group. How is he?
Binyam is, well, obviously you all know that, or you may know, that Binyam was held for close to 8 years. And his time in Guantanamo, again, was relatively tame in comparison to where he was held, which was in a secret rendition, secret prison in Morocco, a proxy prison in Morocco, where the same arguments were put forward. We didn't do it, the Moroccans did it. But what's happening now, and for the first time in British history, the police have been ordered to investigate the intelligence services for complicity in torture. Now, I don't know how that's going to pan out for you, because the intelligence services and the police work very, very close together, so I don't know how that's going to happen in reality. But people are afraid. People are afraid of what they have done might catch up with them. Binyam himself, he's a very calm person, very collected person, amazing. And you have to look at this in context. If you think I'm calm and collected, then in comparison to what happened to Binyam, he was tortured in methods that I think there are some young people there, so I don't really want to say it, but he was tortured with a razor in some extremities, with a razor blade. And that's just one of the methods they used on him. And Binyam is unbelievably sane, at least on the appearance of it. Like everybody else who gets released from that place, the first thing they think about is, what about the guy still over there? So there's this feeling of guilt that we all carry. And it makes us respond in different ways, but we all try to do what we can to assist those still held.
Could I ask a question there? Just coming back to Guantanamo, there are something over 200 people still detained. And as you pointed out, it is almost coming up to a year since Obama ordered the closure of the camp, or the camps within Guantanamo Bay. I think we've heard that 1 or 2 countries are offering to take some of the prisoners. Belgium, Spain might consider, Sweden is taking 4. Very, very small numbers, no less than, no more than a dozen people. What do you think is going to happen to all those people still in there?
It's a very good question. I was just, before I came here, meeting with the lawyers of one of the people that are still held in Guantanamo, and they're looking for ways of how is it possible, where could he possibly go in the world. There are, I think, about 170 countries in the world, and it's really sad that we have to ask, where can we send these people? It's as if they're still aliens. There are several people, as you said correctly, who've been returned or sent to countries where they will be safe. Some people have returned to France. Others have returned the 2 Uzbeks returned to Northern Ireland, or went to not Northern Ireland, to the Republic of Ireland recently. Switzerland is going to take 4, and so forth. We are finding places that I'm sure most people wouldn't even recognize on the map. The Chinese Uyghurs, for example, who are dissidents from their own country, have never been a threat to the United States of America, accepted by the United States as no threat, are nonetheless being sent to the popular island of Palau, which I'm sure everybody knows where they are. They're in the Pacific Ocean. And three more have been sent from one tropical paradise island of Guantanamo to the other one of Bermuda, who I've spoken to recently. Again, these guys are Uyghurs, China recently. So the largest single group that exists in Guantanamo are the Yemenis. There are about 100 Yemenis still there. And if their problem is solved, I believe that Guantanamo can easily be closed down. The reason why, of course, the Yemenis are not being returned is because Yemen itself is in turmoil. There is war taking place there between the government and different groups. There is undoubtedly a presence of Al-Qaeda there, and the Americans fear that people who return after having been tortured for so long may take up hostilities. But for the most part, I can tell you 530 people out of about 800 have been released. Perhaps 2 or 3 of them have actually entered or re-entered hostilities against the United States of America. Most of them are trying to build up what's left of their shattered lives.
Gentleman here first.
I think what's interesting is the subtext, the way torture is being used in the war on terror. I'm sure most of the people in this room, hopefully all the people, would object to torture on moral grounds, but a lot of the people who aren't in this room would accept it as a sort of necessary evil, on the assumption that in certain circumstances it will produce evidence that this is the argument put out. It seems clear to me that the Americans have never bought into that yet, except maybe the rank and file, because not only the fact that, you know, for hundreds of years people have made a statement, people being tortured will tell you what you want to hear, and you go to the case of Chico, which, although I couldn't remember the name, so I didn't put up my hand, I know the story, and that was what Colin Powell used to justify the invasion of Iraq. An interesting point is that that was retracted. It was simply telling them what they wanted to do. I was involved with a case with Samuel Hajj, as you almost certainly know, 99 times out of 100, they only asked him one thing: what are the links between Al Jazeera and Al Qaeda? It wasn't something they believed was true, but they thought if they harassed him and asked him enough, he would eventually say it was. And that's quite interesting that the silent majority of people who most of the time seem liberal and reasonable are probably thinking that torture is acceptable in extreme cases because of the information it yields, whereas the torturers have a different agenda.
You're absolutely right. Interestingly, tonight on Radio 4 is, was a program, you all missed it now, but it's about Samuel Hajj, and it's done by Gavin Esler. I think you can go online and listen to it again. And Samuel just called me actually on the way here, because we're going to Malaysia together next week to give some evidence in a tribunal that they want to set up against President Bush, or former President Bush, and Rumsfeld. You're absolutely right. There is a notion around the world, and people do believe that in some circumstances torture is justified. But we really, if that's the case, I don't know of any examples where it's worked. I only know of examples like Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi. How many lives did they protect by torturing him? And how many lives were taken by torturing him? You need to weigh that up. And if there's one case in point, that's what I said, if anybody forgets everything that I've said today, but just remembers the case of Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi, that they remember this one as an argument, as an evidence, as a rebuttal to anybody who wants to come and argue for the case of torture and say torture works. And you're right, absolutely. Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi, I forgot to mention, did retract his statement, and it was done a year afterwards, and the CIA accepted that what he'd said was a fabrication.
There's somebody down here, I think.
I was wondering if you made any more sense of, or had time to reflect on what was behind the whole process. You talk about war, you talk about President Bush sort of initiating something. I wonder if you had time to reflect on how deeply those were responsible, or what the motive was.
Of September the 11th, you mean?
That, September 11th, what happened after that as well?
Well, I'll tell you straight, I'm not into the conspiracy theory. I don't believe that it's a conspiracy. I believe that people did carry it out, the attack did happen. I think the United States government took advantage of it and did what they did in a way that I think was intended. There is plenty of evidence about, I think it's called the New American Century or something. Yeah, about what certain people within Bush's cabinet wanted. I think they've been regarded actually as the loonies or the crazy by some people, Rumsfeld and co. And what they wanted to do was have domination in that region, which is clear. It's so evident that, especially over Afghanistan, why are they fighting over this poorest country in the entire continent of Asia? Why are they fighting over it for? And there was a superpower prior to this fighting over it, and the other superpower, rather than thanking the Afghan people for, that's where the Soviet Union broke its back. The Soviet Union failed in Afghanistan. So rather than thanking the Afghan people for being a vehicle for that, they invaded again. And the Afghan people continue to pay the price because they are expendable and people have interests. And one thing about the Americans, particularly people like John Bolton and others who are the representatives to the UN, they will say openly that we don't care, this is not about what's right and what's wrong. They don't say that this is about what's right and what's wrong. They say it's about our interests. And interests don't always necessarily match up with what's right and what's wrong. So that's what I think this is about. Lord Palmerston, 1852, said as the Prime Minister of Great Britain, we have no perpetual enemies, we have no perpetual friends, only our interests are perpetual. And that's what I've reflected upon.
I just wondered if you could tell us anything about the school in Afghanistan, the girls' school under the Taliban that you were trying to open.
Yeah, people sometimes get surprised when I say that I was involved in setting up a school because the common belief is that the Taliban did not allow or did not promote education for females, and that may be true in a lot of places where there is a Pashtun majority, but Kabul, which is the capital and which is where I was, did not have a Pashtun majority. It had a very mixed, it's the capital city, so it's very, very mixed. The Taliban, primarily as I understand it, didn't want foreign non-Muslim influence in their country. They're very traditional and very, very conservative people. They did not object to, they didn't give us a license to open school, but neither did they stop us. We had schools, school buses picking up girls from their homes, bringing them to the school, and they never stopped us. They never said a word to us. The school, however, here's the irony, was hit by a cruise missile and destroyed, but thankfully there were no children in the school.
Were you allowed to communicate with the other prisoners?
It varied from place to place, actually. When I was held in Bagram, there was no talking allowed at all. I mean, it's bizarre, this place. It was built by the Russians, built by the Soviets. You could still see Soviet Russian inscription on the walls. You could hear every footstep of every guard. You could hear the screams so clearly at night and the day of guards and prisoners. And that's because we weren't allowed to talk. We weren't allowed to open our mouths. And as Muslims, we often like to recite the Quran, say prayers loud so we can get some tranquility from it. Even this, if they saw us moving our lips in recitation, we would be taken to the front of the cell and our hands would be tied up above the top of the cell to the cage, to the top of the cage. And we'd be left there suspended like this with a hood over our heads. So we weren't allowed to talk. Nonetheless, we developed a technique of ventriloquism. So we could speak like this kind of conversation without anybody knowing. So we could do those sorts of things in Bagram. In Guantanamo, I was in solitary confinement, so there was nobody to speak to. There were no prisoners to speak to until I was put on the blocks. And I was eventually put on the blocks with 5 other people. They included an Australian called David Hicks, who's now returned, Feroz Abbasi, a British man who returned with me, Ali Hamza, who is the only self-declared member of Al-Qaeda I've ever met in Guantanamo, who says that he was and is part of the organization, and Osama bin Laden's right-hand driver. You know, you think about the right-hand man and so forth, but they had the driver. They'll get the cook next. Yeah, he was next to me. That was
I'm going to, Moazzam has answered a lot of questions. I'm conscious that he is trying to get back to Birmingham tonight, although he's most welcome to stay in Norwich for the evening. But are there any other questions or comments that people would like to
I
make?
just quickly wanted to ask
Yes,
if
yes,
you were
please.
allowed any contact with your family during your detention.
Not conventional contact, not in the sense of phone calls or visits or anything like that, but yes, there were letters. You might have seen one of the letters in this film. It was heavily, as they call, redacted. That letter was written by my daughter, by the way, who was 6 years old at the time, because obviously what she was saying, let me tell you, she once wrote to me, I once wrote to her, and I wrote on the side of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, once I caught a fish alive. And in the hope that she might reply with the second part of the poem. And she did. And some bright young intelligence officer read it. And he must have read the part 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I let it go again. She's teaching him some sort of enigmatic code about how to escape. So he heavily redacted it. He plucked it out. And I only learnt this when I returned back and asked her, what have you written? She told me. So that's the sort of thing that happens with your letters. My letters.
I'll take one more.
Yeah.
Jim, again.
Yeah, well, it's been said that the whole of the sort of Guantanamo operation has been created potential terrorists. Do you have any comment on that?
All depends on your definition of a terrorist, really.
Somebody who blows up innocent people.
Yeah, from 30,000 people from right close up. You see what I mean? I think that some of these terminologies are not very, very clever sometimes, because this is what I said, that if you're going to kill thousands of people in a strike, in an airstrike, that to me is terrorism, as much as it's somebody who kills a few hundred people with a suicide boat. But to answer your question, Guantanamo has created animosity, it's created hostility, it's created anger, it's created a visible symbol of everything that is wrong with the United States of America. And everybody who doesn't like the United States of America, for whatever reason they may choose to do that, can point towards Guantanamo and say, don't be telling us about human rights. So that's the minimum of it. The maximum, here's a very clear answer to what your question is. When I returned from Guantanamo, I saw paraded on television Norman Kember, who was a British hostage taken in Iraq. And I suppose there were many of them. And he had 3 other people with him. But what really struck me is that he'd been dressed in an orange suit by the kidnappers. So that was a message. That was a clear, direct message. And I made an appeal to the kidnappers for his release as a former Guantanamo prisoner, saying that I and the other former prisoners did so. And he was saved. But out of that group, there were 4 people, and one of them was not saved. One of them was beheaded. And he was an American. So yes, Guantanamo has created everything and more, as what you said.
Well, I think I'm not going to say very much after all that, but it has been truly an inspirational talk, and I think we must leave with a very positive note. Sorry, showing my eyes. A very positive note, and that is the image of Moazzam standing with his captor and travelling this country, and perhaps other countries in the future, talking about these and combining and trying to make something positive from all the horrors that we've heard. So thank you very much for a truly inspirational talk. As you realise, this